Good morning, everybody. I think maybe one needs to apologize because we're supposed to start at 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock, but 9 o'clock we're sitting in our chambers waiting for the evidence leaders. But because of one or two problems that some of the evidence leaders experienced, we were unable to start at 10 o'clock as initially planned. But I think we might have to try and make up for that time. And for that reason, I'm going to suggest that we take our lunch break at 1:30 and come back at 2 o'clock and see how far can we go. Advocate Lubana.
Esteemed commissioners, we are ready to proceed with our closing submissions. The question is, where do we start, esteemed commissioners? This is a question I asked my colleague, Advocate Ngobese, as to where do we begin. We remind the Commission that we are making closing submissions on the term of reference 1.2, whether the arms and equipment procured from the SDPPs are being underutilized or being utilized at all. Now, as I bustled as to where do we start, then I remembered what one wise man said, that we should try to paint a picture by dealing with the significant and leaving out the insignificant. Now, this will help to explain to the Commission our challenge in dealing with this term, as all the 5 terms of reference have to be taken together. Simply put, Commissioners, you will appreciate utilization if you appreciate the reasons why we acquired these capabilities. Of course, we'll do our best to focus on the significant. One of the best ways to start, as I was saying to my colleague, Advocate Ngobesa, probably is to begin by being right. Now we need to confront the evidence before the Commission. Now, to simplify this journey of our submissions, we'd like you to look at our written submissions. Our written submissions are encapsulated in 51 pages. Now, let me direct your attention to the first page of our written submissions. And by way of background and introduction, permit me to start by reading to you paragraph 1.1. The substratum of these submissions herald the last leg of the Arms Procurement Commission after the leading of evidence. We've addressed the aspect that our submissions deal with 1.2 term of reference. The approach. These submissions will address evidence-led in summary form thus far. 2.2, the submissions will deal in turns with the following subjects. 2.2.1, analysis of the evidence led in respect of South African Air Force witnesses. 2.2.2, analysis of the evidence led in respect of South African Navy witnesses. That is page 2, esteemed commissioners, of our written submissions. 2.2.3, analysis of the evidence of David Mania, a member of the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee in Defense and Military Veterans. Now, this approach, I think, will simplify our journey of starting by being right. We need to look at the evidence which is standing before the Commission. Now, this analysis also will assist us to focus on the main areas of utilization. Now, it means the focus will only be on the testimony that beseech this Commission's hearings under these topics, Commissioners. Now, we'll eschew from bothering you by reading page by page. Now, we'll invite you, if need be, if you believe that we are going off tangent and delaying the process, because we are confident that not only were you confronted with substantial evidence that we don't intend rehashing, you'd appreciate the summaries that we'll be dealing with. Now, we start on page 2 by taking you through the evidence of the Air Force. Now, page 2 summarizes that when you deal with the Air Force, we'll be looking at General Bain and Brigadier Berger. You'll also note that when we deal with the Navy, because we'll be taking the Air Force and the Navy together, we'll be looking at the testimony of Rear Admiral Green, Rear Admiral Hicks, and Rear Admiral Philip Schutz. Now, the Commission has already been told that we'll also look at the testimony of David Maynard. Up to so far, if the Commissioners have questions to pose with our approach, please draw our attention. Page 3 of our submissions is not important, particularly issues that will be dealt with by other teams. What has become stubborn and standing before the Commission is the items that were purchased. They're analyzed in paragraph 5. We need not waste time on them. Page 4. The topic is allegations of underutilization or no utilization at all of the arms and equipment acquired in terms of the SDPP. Now, that's where we start to confront the evidence. You will remember, Commissioners, that Mr. David Maynard informed the Commission that Vance light fighter aircrafts are underutilized by the South African Air Force. We are not going to waste time by taking you to the records. They're standing before you at the bottom of the page. He testified that the Hawk aircrafts are underutilized by the South African Air Force. He further testified that he was informed by the Minister of Defense and Military Veterans that the South African Air Force has placed 12 Gripen fighter aircraft in long-term storage. These aircrafts are placed in storage as a planned activity in line with the utilization and budget expenditure patterns flow of the South African Air Force. Hawk and Gripen aircrafts are underutilized due to the lack of funding. 6.1.5, if one applies the test of the former Chief of the South African Air Force, General Gigiano, Hawk aircraft are required to fly 4,000 hours per year. One will see that Hawk aircrafts were underutilized during 2008 and 2009 financial year because they only managed to fly only 2,000 hours. And he concluded by saying, or he emphasized the fact that General Bain did not apply the test of General Gigiano to determine whether the Hawk aircrafts are underutilized or not. Now, this is the part of the criticism that came in as far as the Hawks and the Gripens are concerned. And this is also what we established that during our consultations with Mr. David Maynard, he kept on amplifying this testimony as set out in our written submissions. Now, let's look at the criticism by the public in as far as utilization of the 3 submarines and some of the frigates are concerned. Paragraph 7, criticism has been leveled by the public pertinent to the non-utilization of the 3 submarines procured by the Navy. The self-same criticism has also been raised before the Portfolio Committee on Defense. Consideration of the public criticism by the Commission will assist the Commission to determine particularly whether the 3 submarines are underutilized or not at all. The criticism is underscored by the following points. Now, Commissioners will appreciate why we start with the backgrounds of summarizing what the criticisms are. Hence, we started with Mr. David Maynard in as far as the Gripens and the Hawks are concerned. In as far as the submarines and the frigates are concerned, the criticism is as follows. The Navy does not utilize the 3 submarines because they require repairs after being fitted with the wrong engines. You have heard this testimony for the better part of the Navy officers testimony, how they refuted and ridiculed it. These engines were supposed to be fitted into frigates, not submarines. The repairs will cost the South African Navy a huge amount of money. Let's not waste time by referring you to the specific portions of the record. These backgrounds will simplify when you go to the rudiments and unpacking these testimonies to assist the Commission and to back up our submissions. The 3 submarines are inoperable and kept at the dock. Yeah, there was a joke that was being made that I'm happy that Dr. Young is here. He says they are being given airtime. It means 1 or 2 are being hoisted. They are being given airtime. 7.1.3. One of the submarines, SOS, has been utilized less than the other 2 submarines. Page 6. The submarines are inoperable because of the mechanical fault relating to faulty batteries fitted into them. One of the frigates, the Amatola, is not utilized because it has been fitted with a defective engine. The non-utilization of frigates and submarines is due to the lack of funding. Now, let's start dealing with utilization itself. We've given you the background of what is being said in as far as the critics are concerned on utilization. Now, let us look at how we will deal with the meaning of utilization. You'll find that on page 6 of our submissions.
I'm sorry, Ketelban. If you don't mind, the meaning of utilization, we have seen it. We have gone through your submissions, and even the relevant cases that we have referred to, that we have seen. I don't think it's necessary for you to repeat it. Thank you.
I've always appreciated judges know the law. You don't overwhelm them with the law. You give them facts, they assist you with the law. We are not going to take you through the cardinal rules of interpretation, and thanks for drawing our attention that you've appreciated what we are seeking to achieve with those pages that deal with the cardinal rules of interpretation, because in the ultimate end, we would like to contend how this commission should look at utilization. But what is critical in as far as this paragraph is concerned is what we say in paragraph 8.2, commissioners. But for you to appreciate it, let us see what the heading in paragraph 8 says. What does utilization mean in the context of government notice number 34731, number 92604, November 2011, the one that is the foundational pillar of this commission? Paragraph 8.2. The meaning of utilization is at the center of quandary. The meaning has to be grappled within a reasonable, responsible manner, lest it becomes crippling. This is so, as so often parties at the center of the quandary cannot see the solution. It is like holding the book too close to the face, thereby not making out the words. Now, we'll try to show the commission why we believe that both parties, that is looking at the officers and the critics, we should appreciate what utilization should acceptably mean in the context of the cardinal rules of interpretation. We are not going through those cases, commissioners. Let us go to page 15, paragraph 9. This is very important, and we'll be taking you to 1 or 2 cases to appreciate the foundational pillars that assist us to deal with this subject, utilization, in the context of the founding government notice. The meaning of utilization in the context of evidence tendered before the commission. It emanates from the evidence tendered before the commission by the officers of the Navy and the Air Force that the meaning of utilization is construed differently by officers from the one understood by the public, including critics. The critics and the public are lumped together as the public for the purpose of this aspect of the submissions. Please, we are not trying to generalize this aspect, but we're trying to draw bright lines for you to appreciate how we will contextualize utilization by appreciating what the public says against what the officers are saying. The public's perception is that utilization relates only to physical utilization. Properly contextualized, Commissioners, from the public's perception, the word utilization occurs when the Army utilizes the equipment for the purpose of combat during the war. We will deal with specific examples on how utilization has to be looked at from the officer's point of view. It starts here. Rear Admiral Green, one of the Navy witnesses testifying on behalf of the whole SANDF, informed the Commission that utilization of assets within the military context encapsulates the following. Now, look at it from where the public's perception anticipates that this equipment and capabilities have to be utilized for the purpose of combat during war. I'm not going to read the whole paragraph, but I'll hit the main points. Admiral Green says the utilization of assets is planned in terms of government's ordered commitments and ministerial priorities, which in fact reflect the former. The emphasis is government's ordered commitments. The defense value chain guides the process in order to achieve the mandate, and in doing so provides the collateral support to government. The defense value chain starts with a strategic direction process guiding force development, force preparation, and force employment. Now, even if there's no combat during war, there's a process that starts to qualify utilization. It starts with guiding force development, force preparation, and force employment. Even when that process is ensuing and engulfing itself, utilization is taking place. These processes are achieved by underpinning force support. The utilization of assets is covered in force development inter alia by operational testing and evolution and the doctrine development. The force preparation is the mandate of the service chiefs to be able to provide the Chief of the South African National Defence Force with prepared and supported forces. It means when all those chiefs are sitting and planning force preparation, force development, and force employment, that process of utilization has started, Commissioners. The prepared and supported forces are provided to the Chief of the Joint Operations, who employs the forces as directed by the Chief of the South African National Defence Force. Joint training to integrate the prepared forces is executed before the deployments. It means even when they are training, there's utilization going on. We don't have to see combat where our arms and equipment are being directed against a foreign hostile power, or we are attacking or chasing some pirates or some rebel forces. That process of preparation itself engulfs and explains utilization. From this understanding of the value chain, one ought to understand that utilization is focused to achieve an outcome through a number of outputs. It's process. It's not something that one could say it ends up with combat during the war, or it's demonstrated by combat during the war. Assets have to be utilized in a life cycle. There it shows that it's a process, Commissioners. That ensures that the minimum number that are required for force employment are available in terms of being prepared as required by the relevant doctrine. The other assets will be in various stages of maintenance, so that when one asset comes in for maintenance, there's another ready to enter the force employment cycle. It means even when one submarine is standing at the dockyard, being maintained, and the other one is coming in, one could still address and talk about utilization. In order to ensure that the asset is ready for force employment, it must have passed through the force preparation cycle. Now, the concept is known as life cycle management. There's no need for me to go deeper into that now. Page 18, 9.3. Let's look at what Admiral Schutz, one of the Navy officers, said. Now, I assure you, Commissioners, that this is a summary. We've done our best because we did not want to overwhelm you with repeating each and every testimony. This is a summary of what these witnesses are saying. So we'll try by all means to address these summaries positively to assist the Commission. I wish I could shorten them further, but where I could, I will, Commissioners. Rear Admiral Philip Schutz, one of the Navy witnesses, also confirmed the description given by Rear Admiral Green regarding the concept of utilization of assets. Now, what it simply means is that definition is not static. It's process. It follows through different stages. Now, Rear Admiral Philip Schutz defined utilization of assets as follows. The frigates and submarines are managed within an operational cycle, which provides for both operational availability, utilization, and maintenance period. You can see that it's not static, Commissioners. It's process-driven. Broadly speaking, the periods within the operational cycle are force preparation periods. That's a stage on its own, which include the safety of readiness. We've heard about this term, SARC process. I'm not going to repeat it. Individual ship training and exercises, and Navy unique multi-ship exercises. Force employment periods, which includes the conduct of operations, other audit commitments, and joint and multinational exercises. Self-maintenance periods, where the ship's company conducts routine maintenance, as well as minor onboard reports. Now, let's pause there, Chair. And Commissioner Musi, this has got nothing to do with combat. We are not at war. We are not directing our equipment and capabilities against a foreign hostile power. You can see that it's process-driven. All the stages are part and engulf the operational cycle, which defines utilization in the context of the Army officers. We note also that where the ship's company is assisted by the fleet maintenance unit in conducting maintenance and repair activities, that's still part of the operational cycle that qualifies utilization. And docking and essential defect periods, where you inspect the ship and its defects, where a ship or submarine docks and the dockyard carries out underwater maintenance. Now, let's pause there. That's where the critics come in and say they've seen some of these submarines and frigates at the dockyard static. Now, the operational cycle qualifies to this commission that this does not mean that there's no utilization. I think that speaks for it, Commissioners. We're not going to rehash it. At the end of the operating cycle, a vessel decommissions and is handed over to the dockyard for a refit, on completion of which the vessel will once again enter the operation cycle. They've seen these capabilities at the dockyards and they say they're not being utilized. I'm addressing the context in which the critics look at utilization in this context, Commissioners. During a refit, major repairs, During a refit, major repairs, engineering changes, and half-life extensions, upgrades are normally carried out, whereas a self-maintenance period could be as short as a week. Of course, for that week, that capability standing on the dockyard. A refit could be as long as 2 years. For that 2 years, it could also be on the dockyard. The SARC process is broken down into the following. Chair, you have heard about this. We are not going to repeat it. The last aspect deals with force preparation, which is also a stage on its own, where the chief of the joint operation being responsible for the conduct of operations and the conduct of joint and multinational exercises. That's where one could see the real manifestation of utilization. In that case, the armed forces have been given to the chief of joint operations. You can see them in motion. Perhaps that's where the critics start to appreciate utilization. But look at where we come from, esteemed commissioners. From force preparation, force readiness, force employment, up until the chief of joint operations is being given the equipments and the forces. In this regard, it should be noted that the Department of Defense Annual Business Plan orders the number of vessels that the South African Navy is to maintain within the operational cycle, and what their readiness levels are. You can't give them all, in other words. The Defense Annual Business Plan informs which ones would be operational, which one are to be maintained, which one will go through the cycle. The determination is both a function of requirement and availability of funds. Now, we start to deal with the analysis of evidence led in respect of various witnesses. I wish I could underwhelm you here. You've heard these testimonies. I'll try to be quick and put my foot on the pedal. The Air Force. The Air Force first witness was Brigadier General Peter Daniel Berger. I'm not going to take you through each and everything that he says or that we've summarized. Paragraph 10.2.1, page 20. The evidence of Brigadier General Peter Daniel Berger talked to the utilization of the light utility helicopter LUH Augusta. In brief, General Berger testified as follows. Please go to page 21, 10.2.1.4. The function of the LUH is divided into two roles. That is primary role and secondary role. Considering the role that the LUH is to play in South Africa and the region as a whole, the majority of the utilization of the helicopter is within the secondary role. The primary role of the LUH is to assist the South African National Defence Force to prepare itself in order to deter any external hostilities. The secondary role involves the following: supporting the army during times of conflict, participating in peace support, peacekeeping, enforcement operations. This we see all the time, Chair. I'm not testifying. The Navy officers did mention that. If you look at the newspapers and television, that becomes stubborn before all of us, that there's always participation in peace support, peacekeeping, and enforcement operations. Humanitarian role both day and night during peace times. The news, the TVs do demonstrate this amply. You've heard what the naval officers have said as commissioners. Peacetime roles include tasks such as rescues from inhospitable terrain and casualty evacuations in virtually all weather conditions. We spelled weather wrongly. We have heard this testimony. Page 22, providing assistance and services to government departments in accomplishing their tasks and or missions. LUH provides the following services and assistance to the government departments. I'm not going to take you through all of them. They're standing before you, Commissioners. A, B, C, D, E. Supporting the South African Police Services, rescue missions, supporting the South African Police Service in crime prevention operations in order to reduce the local crime rate, supporting the South African Police Services in maintenance of internal stability, supporting the Department of Foreign Affairs, assisting both local and foreign government departments. The LUH is also utilized in respect of border patrols. The LUH managed to perform the following exercises. You have heard them. You've heard the officers talking about these exercises. There's also operations. I'm on page 23, Commissioners, paragraph 10.2.1.6.2, operations. Let's conclude in 10.2.1.7 on page 24. The LUHs have flown 18,000 hours since entering service in 2005. The hours flown are more than the hours the Air Force was expecting, considering the fact that the initial plan was to fly 200 hours per airframe per year.
I'm sorry, Advocate Liwala, just on that point. My calculations tells me that the LUH haven't flown the expected hours. And this evidence was clearly emerged from the testimony of Brigadier Berger, because according to their calculation, they were expecting that the LUH should fly 60,000 hours or 40,000 hours for the period that they were delivered until they gave evidence. From their evidence, it emerged that the LUH flew only about 40% of their projected hours. And I think they went on even to give reasons why that happened. Unless if I misunderstood that evidence.
Yes, my colleague will come back to it. My colleague nods and says you are correct. If you want us to take you directly to that testimony.
I think look at the evidence of General Berger and General Purser. In fact, General Purser went to a point of giving reasons why those LUH did not fly the expected or the projected hours. So it will not be correct to say that they flew the projected hours. I just thought that maybe let me bring that to your attention.
Chair, nonetheless, it doesn't even dilute the interpretation of operational cycle and utilization in the context of the way the officers define it, contextualize it, and legitimize it. You are confirming what we have heard. The issue of the figures, it's like looking at art. You'd appreciate them from different angles. I don't want us to delve into this, but thanks for rehashing it. My colleague actually has flagged it, we've seen it, and may we proceed. We deal with Brigadier General John William Bain's testimony. General Bain's testimony talks to utilization in respect of lead-in fighter trainer Lift Hawk and advanced light fighter aircraft Alpha Gripen. General Bain testified as follows. Page 25, the Gripen. In brief, the Gripen is I beg your pardon. Chair, will definitely deal with this aspect that we've highlighted, just to integrate it with what we have just submitted in as far as the figures and the numbers are concerned. But we repeat, it just does not dilute utilization in the context of how the Army officers and the Navy officers look at it. It's an operational cycle. It goes through stages. You give some of this equipment, you don't give some. You withhold some. You make some to function. You can put some in storage. Some you put in a dock. Some fly, some not fly. You know, we've had testimony of General Shock, if I'm not mistaken, and even Admiral Green, even Admiral Hicks and Admiral Schutz. They say, you know, you operate this equipment like insurance. Some of them you reserve for the ultimate end because you don't know when a foreign hostile power would assail and attack South Africa. So some will be stored and not be used. Some will be used for few hours. They could be flown for 18 hours instead of 18,000 hours instead of 60,000 hours. But that does not mean they do not satisfy operational cycle that qualifies utilization. We will deal with this aspect if need be, Commissioners. Brigadier General John William Bain testified as follows, page 25. The Gripen. In brief, the Gripen is a supersonic, single-engine, dual and single-seat, multi-role combat aircraft, able to perform a defense, surface attack, which includes both air-to-ground and air-to-sea attack, and as well as surveillance, which is both reconnaissance and electronic gathering of information in the same mission. It is globally interoperable. Now, this informs the worth of having to acquire this capability, Commissioners. The Gripen has capabilities such as defensive and offensive defense features and equipment such as airborne radar, air-to-air missiles, helmet-mounted display HMD, standoff and precision-guided munitions, non-guided munitions, cannon, civilians and targeting ports and anti-shipping missiles fitting for. The South African version of the Gripen was the first to receive a helmet-mounted display. Once again, this explains the importance of having to acquire this capability. The Hawk. Hawk is a transonic single-engine, dual-seat aircraft able to perform all required fighter training missions. Hawk is utilized to ensure safe and seamless fighter training, bridging the gap between the Pilatus PC-7 and the Gripen advanced light fighter aircraft. It is also utilized for certain collateral SANDF support. Commissioners, this makes one to salivate why we have to acquire these capabilities. South African Gripen system consists of 26 aircraft, 17 single-seat and 9 dual-seats. Hawk system consists of 24-seat aircraft. The utilization of Hawk and Gripen, this must be underscored. The utilization of Hawk and Gripen should be measured against South African Air Force staff requirement, which finds credence in the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, the White Paper on Defense and Defense Review of 1998. We will eschew and resist from overwhelming you with the Defense Review, the White Paper, and the Constitution as to why the utilization of the Hawk and Gripen is so critical. South African Air Force staff requirement gives the best estimated average flying hours for the aircrafts per year and also serves as a baseline to determine the cost and the funding needed for each aircraft. We'll still show you the disparities and the distinctiveness between what we started with in as far as the testimony of Mr. David Mania against what the Air Force officers say in as far as the flying times and the utilization of the Gripen and the Hawk are concerned. The Hawk and Gripen have met all the requirements set out in the SA staff requirement. Hawk aircrafts have flown over 10,000 major accident-free hours since 2005, and the Gripen aircraft has flown 3,500 since 2008. Now, what is remarkable, Commissioners, is this testimony has never been refuted and controverted, except in what the critics have said, and will demonstrate that even the critics have been corrected by the records and the statistics in as far as the aircraft officers say in this context. These hours include completion of 95% of Hawk and 80% of the Gripen operational test and evaluation, in bracket capital letter OT and E, down to the units operating the aircraft with air and ground crews. The remaining OT and E for both types will be completed before final system handover. What is critical is the percentages of the completions of the operational test and evaluation. The OT and E are explained as operational test and evaluation, Commissioners. Hawk and Gripen have taken part in many South African Air Force joint SANDF and multinational exercises in and outside the Republic of South Africa, and specific SANDF operations since 2005. The two flight test instrument, FTI, aircraft have been utilized for various test programs and clearances at the South African Air Force Test Flight and Development Center in TFBC in Overberg. Operations taken by the Gripen and Hawks include inter alia. We're not going to go through them, Chair. Commissioner Musida standing before you, page 28, the Hawk. The operations of the Hawk are also standing before you. The operations of the Gripen aircraft are in 11.1.5, of the Hawk 11.1.12. Page 29, the Hawk aircrafts were involved in the following exercises. 11.1.14, the ratio of the aircraft utilized so far is, now these exercises and operations obviously equate to combat. Utilization is concrete, Commissioners. It's standing before you. The ratio of the Hawk utilized.
Can I just quickly interrupt you? There's one word that features here which I don't understand. It's the name of a project, I think. On page 27 of your submissions, 10.1.10A. there's a word there which signifies a project that took place during 2010. It relates to the World Cup, Soccer Cup. What is that word? Is it Kwili or what is it? What is it?
Actually, it's a word in my mother tongue, Commissioner Musi. Kwili, it's literally interpreted, Kwili, it's a ball, a soccer ball. Kwili. That's why you'd say Kwili Yamautu, a football. Kwili.
Spelled. There must be a G after the K. It's spelled Kwili, which is football. Well, we must correct them. The correct spelling is KGW, Kweli, football.
Thank you, Commissioner Musi. We will, but it's written SKWELE, but you're right, it's KGWELE. In my mother tongue, KG is very critical. As in other tongues, VH is very critical. Thank you, Commissioner Musi. We'll correct it. We're in page 29, talking about the ratio for the aircraft utilized so far. We're talking about the Hawk aircrafts. Hawk aircrafts at 95% force preparation and 5% force employment. That's the operational cycle again, the phases of utilization. The Gripen at 94% force preparation and 6% force employment, the operational cycle, the stages of utilization. The bulk of the 5% and the 6% force employment was during the World Cup. That speaks for itself, Commissioners. Paragraph 12, we are summarizing now what the Air Force officer said. General Bain concludes by stating the following in his statement. Clearly the Hawk, that's page 30, Commissioners. Clearly the Hawk and Gripen systems have been well utilized since delivery in line with the current security environment. Should the security environment change to one of conflict, then the utilization of the systems will change as and when required to defend and protect the Republic in line with the constitutional mandate. I did mention, as I was qualifying in the earlier pages, about the summary of these capabilities, that it makes one to salivate. Of course, it makes one to appreciate that the constitutional mandate expected from the South African National Defence Force would be met by these capabilities in line with their operational cycle that qualifies the utilization. Now we are dealing with the Navy. Unless there are questions, you have seen the operational cycle of the Air Force, that these capabilities, the Hawk and the Gripen systems, have been well utilized since delivery in line with the current security environment. Of course, we've seen them being utilized in different areas, from peace missions, stability inside the country, assisting, demonstrating the internal security. If need be, I haven't heard of any instance where we flexed our biceps, that is, that we could use force in under attack, where these capabilities are being utilized, specifically the Gripen and the Hawk, but that doesn't mean that they haven't been utilized. I've requested Ngobesa to verify it with me. We checked as to whether in the DRC, in Central Africa, in Lesotho, were they being utilized. We couldn't find an answer, Commissioners. But be that as it may, Brigadier General Bain, I beg your pardon, General Bain has summarized it so well that they are being utilized in line with the operational cycle. Now, let's deal with the Navy. We've already summarized what Rear Admiral Schutz said. We're looking at paragraph 13, page 30. Unless there are questions, Commissioners, before we shoot, we're actually left with few pages under utilization, and then we'll be dealing with the debates, where we'll invite you to debate with us, if need be, about the inferences that you should be drawn, whether the evidence tendered by the officers of the SANDF rebuts the allegations of the public and the critics, that the equipment procured by the SANDF are underutilized and not utilized now. Thus you'll appreciate why we started the way we started, Commissioners. Unless there are questions, Commissioners, we are going to the Navy.
Ask you this. I see that as far as the utilization of the aircraft, the Hawks and the Gripen, they seem to be confined to exercises and things like parades and things like pass-by. They haven't been involved in any conflict situation at all.
I think the officers could qualify it, but I have read, without misleading the Commission, that is it in Central Africa at one time the special force which was there was under attack, and the Gripens were not sent in, and I learned that when the Gripens came, they managed to repel that advancing force that was assailing them. I've got to be careful not to testify, and this is a piece of testimony that has not been led. I'm posing myself a question why. But I've seen them, Commissioner Musi. I'm not a witness before this commission. I've seen them accompanying some of our, on the news, some of our submarines before they go underground. I've seen them at the presidential inauguration. But whether we engage in combat, I do not know. I don't have detail and information. And I've got to be careful not to mislead the Commission.
Yes, we must confine ourselves to the evidence laid before the Commission. And I'm saying this on the basis of what we have set out in the submissions. Doesn't that justify the criticism that we didn't need this? Because the primary function of a Gripen jet fighter is to fight, is to be engaged in warfare. And it looks like they haven't been engaged in any conflict situation whatsoever. What would be the answer to that if that criticism is raised?
Yeah, Chair, but we've heard Commissioner Moose, we've heard the testimony that their function is not only to be supportive during only times of conflict. There's been instances where they participate in peace support, peacekeeping and enforcement of operations. For instance, when you see them flying, take the presidential inauguration. They symbolize not only the might of South Africa, but the constitutional mandate of the South African National Defence Force. Of course, they participated also in humanitarian role. They do it all the time. The officers testified about that. I think modern war, if I'm not mistaken, is not fought literally in physical combat. Sometimes even flexing your muscles. I remember the naval officers mentioned this. They said the fact that it is known that South Africa has them, on its own it's a deterrence and assist in projecting our country not to be taken for granted. And no foreign hostile power would try to attack us knowing that we have these capabilities. What does that mean, Commissioner Musi? You don't have to look at it by interpreting from the critic's point of view, that you utilize them only when you go to war, during times of conflict. I mean, the participation is all-inclusive. Look at the stages of operational cycle themselves. They explain to the Commission and to all and sundry that there are periods and different stages when you use them. I understand operational cycle not being static. It's inclusive. The fact that you are using them in peace times, you could be supporting the Department of Foreign Affairs is adequate. The symbolism of them flying over our skies, if there's an important functions. The fact that we also participate in joint trainings signifies that, they're being utilized. Now, combat, I don't understand it to mean that we should use casualties. or there should be casualties. There's combat even during training, Commissioner Musi. And the officers did mention that they are being utilized for those purposes. Many years ago in Luwatle, I think it was all over the newspapers, if I'm not mistaken, there were casualties which started enlightening one and bring fresh awareness that even during those exercises, this ammunition and capabilities are being utilized in line with the operational cycle phase that defines and qualify utilization.
Deterrence is quite important, and I think the witnesses emphasize the issue of deterrence. And in order to maintain that deterrence, you ought to have them ready. So preparation is also important. In that context, I would understand the situation.
Thank you, Commissioner Musi. May we proceed to the Navy? The Navy, it's easy because we dealt with that testimony. Myself and Ngobesa had to look at every hair in the nostril of the testimony of the Air Force officers. And we assure you it was not free from difficulties, but we did our best as summarized. We'll still come back to it when we deal with rebuttal to demonstrate to you that whether the evidence tendered by the officers of the SANDF rebuts the allegations of the public and the critics, whether this equipment procured by the SANDF are underutilized or utilized. We're still coming back in summarizing our submissions. Now, page 30, the Navy. You heard the testimony of Rear Admiral Philip Schutz. We wanted to summarize it better than we did in these pages, and we couldn't succeed, but we'll do our best to even summarize it further. You know, they say if you generalize, you omit. We've got to be careful not to do that. By Admiral Schutz's testimony, utilization of frigates and submarines has been addressed. The Admiral Schutz testified as follows, page 31, paragraph 13.3. The first delivery of the 4 MECO 8200 frigates was made during 2006. You will remember them. Commissioners Isandlwani, Spionkop Amatola, and SOS Mendy. The last delivery was during September 2004. All the vessels were handed over to the South African Navy by the 20th March 2007. The submarines, on the other hand, were acquired under a project called Wills. The first delivery of the submarines was during April 2006. The last delivery was in May 2008. You remember, we refresh you, there were 3, Queen Mujaji, Charlotte Matreke, and Manta Tise. Let's start with the frigates utilization. Paragraph 14. During 2002, the South African Navy recognized that the frigate utilization as defined in Naval Staff Requirement SIC 6-80 or stroke 80 would not be possible under the South African Navy's then budget allocation. This is history, but it will make you to appreciate the subsequent and following paragraphs. As a result, a new operational profile was proposed for basic sparing. We have heard what basic sparing means, and the manner in which the frigates should be utilized in future. This new operation profile reduced the number of days, reduced the sea days per annum, and reduced the total mission duration for the 4 ships to 131 days per annum. It's still in line with the operational cycle. This reduction does not mean that they were not being utilized. In essence, the frigates would have an annual day cycle providing for a 27% for ops available, 21% sea days, and 9% mission deployment. You were overwhelmed with this testimony, commissioners. I remember it was also tedious to bring it before you. Days ops available are days when the ship is out of maintenance and its post-maintenance certification is complete and it's available for operations until its next maintenance period. It might be standing on the dock when it does that, and that's where the critics come in, that some of them are not being utilized because they are standing on the dock. Some are even being given airtime. 14.2, On page 472, lines 7 to 15 of the record, Admiral Schutz told the Commission that the project indicator operational profile means that one must be able to maintain the ship and prepare the ship for a certain number of days of the year. The ship will be available for utilization. A certain number of days per year, you must be able to utilize the ship at the sea, and you must be able to send the ship on operations for a certain number of days. That qualifies utilization. Frigates and submarines are managed within an operational cycle, which provides for both operational availability, utilization, maintenance periods. Operational cycle allows for periods, page 33, when the ship is operationally available during which it can be utilized, but also for a period when the ship is not operational available, when it is in a maintenance period. It could be standing in the dock. That's where the critics come in and say some of them are static. They are not moving, they are not being engaged, and they are not being utilized. And the evidence controverts that, as you can see, Commissioners. 14.3.1, since their arrival, frigates spent 1,932 days operationally deployed, engaged in the conduct of joint or multinational exercises, or engaged in other ordered commitments. I've got to be careful not to testify. I've seen them going towards West Africa, where they were invited by the region to come and assist because it was said that the pirates were about to move from our east coast to the west coast. I've got to be careful not to testify.
I'm sorry, are you prepared to take the oath?
Hence, I mentioned, I'm just anticipating a question.
Oh, okay, thank you.
16.5% of 1,932 days was in respect of mission employment. Frigates were involved in 24 operations, 25 joint and multinational exercises, and 5 other ordered commitments. The operations range from goodwill visits to countries such as Brazil, Nigeria, China, India, Vietnam, Singapore, Tanzania, Mauritius, East and West Coast patrols. I've just mentioned the West Coast patrol for you, Commissioners. Let me refresh you. Admiral Hicks and Admiral Schutz mentioned the East Coast patrol where the pirates were being repelled. And they also mentioned why to the south you don't have pirates, because they know that the South African Navy will flex its muscles and biceps by utilizing these capabilities. The operations range from, we've mentioned the goodwills, anti-piracy patrols in Mozambique. You'll remember they mentioned them, that it was just a patrol, not that the pirates were coming towards our region. Rescuing of injured sailors of Tristan da Cunha, safeguarding of the 2010 Soccer World Cup, drug runner interdiction, and the escort of a vessel carrying nuclear waste. Exercises conducted by frigates range from simple procedural exercises to complex task force tactical exercises. The exercises performed by the South African Navy involve the following countries: Argentina, Brazil, French, China, India, Mozambique, Namibia, and Uruguay, as well as with NATO spending Maritime Group 1. The exercises were conducted off the South African coast, of the South American coast, and off La Reunion in the Indian Ocean. That's the frigates. Unless there are questions. What's clear, they go through operational cycles. They've spent 1,932 days operationally deployed. They do exercises. They've repelled piracy. They've cleared our region from pirates. They've even cleared the upper part of the east part of our coastline in North Africa from pirates. They've been invited in the west. There it is. Unless there are questions, Commissioners, we're going to submarine utilization. Page 34. Submarines have spent 807 days operationally deployed and engaged also in the conduct of joint multinational exercises or engaged in the initial delivery, trials, and training. Submarines have conducted 16 operations which have included east and west coast patrols, 2 anti-piracy patrols in the Mozambican Channel, and the issue of the submarines was specific. Come to think of it, I'm correcting myself. The naval officer said it is the submarines themselves that actually were repelling the pirates, albeit the frigates would assist. 2 patrols to Marian Island, one of which was aborted due to a technical problem, and participated in Safeguarding Soccer World Cup 2010. We've heard that testimony that when the American Vice President was here, our frigates and submarines had to be alert. You can imagine how much we go to nest relationships, commissioners. Submarines have also participated in 26 joint and multinational exercises with navies of Argentina, Brazil, Germany, India, Namibia, United States of America, and Uruguay, as well as NATO Standing Maritime Group 1. Most of the exercises were conducted off the South African coast. 14.6, considering what that utilization involves force utilization, it should be noted that South African Navy has trained some 4,040 personnel, 647 support personnel, 1,191 technical personnel, and 2,204 combat personnel. Now, remember, utilization also involves force utilization, not only force preparations, force deployment, also force utilization. Rear Admiral Green comes again in paragraph 15. On 15 September 2014, the Commission requested the Department of Defense to provide details of the projected number of days it was anticipated that frigates and the submarines would spend at sea. On 24 November 2014, Admiral Green gave the following evidence. 15.2.1, the projected number of days it was anticipated the frigates and the submarines would spend at sea was conducted in terms of the Department of Defense planning process, which is known as the strategic direction process. The strategic direction process consists of 4 activities. There are the activities that demonstrate utilization, commissioners. Page 36. I'm interested in 15.3.1 that you'll find very helpful. Force preparation requires the Navy to ensure that the vessels are prepared adequately for force employment. The Navy should also know what it intends to do with the vessels and how many hours it will normally take for the vessel to be at sea based on empirical data. There's even accountability, commissioners, because empirical data is needed. Force employment, on the other hand, is directed by the government. The Department of Defense is using hours instead of days because of the instruction of the Auditor General that the performance of the frigates and submarines should be indicated in hours, not in days. Look at the transparency and the accountability. A separate entity and an organ of state monitors how hours instead of days have to be utilized to satisfy utilization. When it comes to planning the hours in respect of force preparations are a more manageable figure than hours in respect of force employment, because force employment is directed on the need of government at that time. The hours are then summated and put into the Navy plan for the year. I'm not going to take you through the hours, they're standing through you. Look at paragraph 15.6.1 to paragraph 15.7.8, commissioners. It means from page 37 to page 38, in line with respecting this independent entity of our government, the Auditor General. There's accountability of the hours projected spent at sea by the frigates since their delivery. We need not emphasize that. Page 39 at the top. In the force employment that was planned for the year, if the force employment that was planned for the year does not materialize, in other words, the need for the ship to proceed on a particular mission or operation is no longer required, then that ship will not go to sea. For that reason, the hours will be reduced. There's even accountability, Commissioners. Admiral Green concluded this testimony by stating as follows. So, when you hear the critics and they discuss that the ships have not been at sea, or make the intimations that there have been some problems, or how they term it, that the vessels are not capable of going to sea, that is not true. It is simply the requirement for them to go to sea no longer exists. It is simply that the requirement for them to go to sea no longer exists. They don't go if there's no need for them to go to sea, Commissioners. Now, here comes the important aspect, paragraph 18. Whether the evidence tendered by the officers of the South African National Defence Force rebuts the allegations of the public and the critics that the equipment procured by the SANDF are underutilized or not utilized at all. Commissioners, here we have to just summarize. You've heard how the Air Force mentioned how the Hawk and the Gripen are being flown, the hours that they are being flown. At the top, allegations of underutilization in respect of Hawk and Gripen aircrafts were raised by David Mania. According to Mania, the Hawks and Gripen are underutilized for the following reasons. Hawks have flown 2,000 hours per year instead of 4,000 hours during 2009 to 2010, as stated by General Gagiano. The Minister of Defense and Military Veterans told the Portfolio Committee on Defense and Military Veterans that the South African Air Force has placed 12 Gripen fighter aircrafts in long-term storage. General Bain, on the other hand, has tendered the following evidence rebutting allegations of underutilization in respect of Hawks and Gripen. General Bain adumbrated in his testimony as follows. The utilization of Hawk and Gripen should be measured against South African Air Force staff requirement, which is underpinned on the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, the White Paper on Defense and Defense Review of 1998. He further says the SAA staff requirement gives the best estimated average flying hours of the aircrafts per year. It also gives a baseline to determine the cost and the funding needed for each craft. Hawks and Gripen have met all the requirements set out in the SAF staff requirement. Hawk aircrafts have flown over 10,000 major accident-free hours since 2005. Gripen aircrafts have flown 3,500 hours since 2008. South African Air Force has adequate Hawk pilots to fit the Gripen. Now, this testimony has not been controverted, and the General was not fully cross-examined to refute what he says. Paragraph 20, with regard to the allegation that 12 Gripen aircrafts have been placed in long-term storage, General Bain testified as follows. During the first quarter of 2013, the Director Combat Systems investigated the possibility of inhabiting 12 Gripen aircrafts due to the low allocated flying hours in the 2013-2014 financial year. During the engagement with the original equipment manufacturer, SAAB, what we came to know as OEM, a more effective and less costly process was agreed to, reducing the number of maintenance activities required for storage and making the aircraft readily available. You'll remember we even asked Mr. Maynard as to whether isn't it the pattern and style all over the world that some of these aircrafts are put in storage, and he didn't dispute that, Commissioners. 20.3, the Director, Combat Systems and SAAB agreed on embarking on a rotational preventative maintenance, what we came to know as RPM, program to better retain fleet integrity. In terms of rotational preventative maintenance, each aircraft is flown at least every 60 days. Director Combat System also placed the aircrafts that were identified for rotational preventative maintenance interns inside revetments to prevent corrosion, external damage to the aircraft, to strictly control the environment in which the aircrafts are secured. We remember we asked Mr. Maynard that isn't it what happens all over the world? We were specific that to him and saying, isn't it what the Americans do? All 26 Gripen aircrafts will be flown and managed in accordance with the rotational preventative maintenance. On page 1109 of the record, line number 1 to 6, General Bain told the Commission that as a result of embarking on the rotational preventative maintenance, there are no Gripen aircraft that are placed in long-term storage. Unless there are questions, we're going to the Navy. We're dealing with a rebuttal now. The topic is whether the SANDF rebuts the allegations of the public and the critics that the equipments procured are underutilized or not utilized at all. The Navy, the frigates and the submarines, page 43. Admiral Schutz tendered the following evidence to refute allegations of non-utilization of frigates and submarines. He was specific in dealing with SOS Manta Tise. He says it has been utilized, the critics say it has been utilized less than the other 2 submarines. That's the criticism. Admiral Schutz denied that the SOS Manta Tise is utilized lesser than the other 2 submarines. Admiral Schutz told the Commission that the Navy operates 2 or 3 submarines within the operating cycle. SOS Manta Tise is not utilized currently because it is undergoing a refit. You heard that testimony, Commissioner. The Amatola, the frigate, is not utilized because it has been fitted with a defective engine. That's what the critics said. The Navy has purchased a replacement engine which will be installed during the ship's refit. Amatola can operate with 1 engine, considering the fact that the frigates procured by the South African Navy are fitted with 3 engines. This allows the frigates to use the other 2 engines whilst one of the engine is inoperable. You remember the testimony when Admiral Schutz was showing the difference between the engine and the propeller, and he summarized it and simplified it so well when he was dealing with this piece of testimony. Amatola has done approximately 200 days deployment in the Mozambique channels whilst using 1 channel. So I'm right, Commissioner. So remember I said that our frigates and both submarines do go towards the upper east on our coastline. The critics say submarines are inoperable because of mechanical fault relating to faulty batteries fitted into them. The batteries of the submarines have a 7 to 8 year lifespan. Therefore, submarines undergo refit every 8 years to replace the batteries. So the South African Navy discovered that there was a build-up of gas in the batteries. And there, I remember Admiral Schutz took you into your confidence. At one time, we considered to put this testimony on affidavit, but we relented and made it open orally before the Commission, as this was found to be confidential. The gas was in the form of hydrogen. The matter has been addressed after being reported to the original manufacturer. In any event, whether the defect in the battery had been identified or not, all the batteries have reached their lifespan and must be replaced. They explained that all these items, like any other manufactured item, do have a lifespan. Page 45, Admiral Green has tendered the following evidence to refute the allegation that the non-utilization of frigates and submarine is due to lack of funding. You remember, some of the critics said that we do not have funds to operate these capabilities. The usage of the equipment is done in terms of the Department of Defense planning process, which is known as a strategic direction process. The strategic direction process is guided by force deployment, development, force preparation, and force employment, the operational cycle, Commissioners. Forced employment requires the Navy to ensure that the equipment are prepared adequately. In other words, forced employment is directed by the government. Assets have to be utilized in a life cycle that ensures that the minimum number that is required for forced employment is available in terms of being prepared as required by the relevant doctrine. Forced preparation, on the other hand, gives the Navy a direction as to how many hours will the equipment spend at sea, including how long it will take the Navy to prepare forces in line with the Auditor General's directive. The strategic direction process assists the Navy to determine how much funding will be needed by the Navy for the particular year for the usage of the equipment. If the forced employment, page 46, paragraph 23.5, if the forced employment that was planned for the particular year does not materialize, in other words, the need for a ship to proceed on the particular mission or operation, there's a typographical error, Commissioners, is no longer required, then the ship will not go to sea for that reason. Next paragraph, what inference, if any, should be drawn by the Commission in the light of evidence tendered by the officers of the SANDF, vis-a-vis the evidence tendered by David Maynard, and as well as the criticism raised by the public with regard to the underutilization or no criticism of arms and equipment? It is manifest that the evidence tendered by the officers of the SANDF demonstrate that the equipment procured by the SANDF are utilized adequately. This is so, as the evidence was never refuted by any person. There was no controverting evidence brought to the fore through cross-examination. No evidence was tendered to dispute Navy officers' evidence except for David Maynard's testimony. David Maynard attempted to dispute the evidence of General Bain by relying on annexures DM1 to DM4. Remember, we even heckled with you, Commissioners, to bring this testimony before the Commission because you wanted to subject it to scrutiny as to whether is it qualified to talk to it or is it relevant. These annexures deal with a reply to a parliamentary question, the DOD's annual report 2013-2012, the DOD's response portfolio committee on defense, and the Auditor General's management report on the regulatory audit and the performance information of the Department of Defense for the year ended 31st March 2009. In our considered view, David Maynard failed to demonstrate that Hawks and Gripen aircrafts are underutilized. This view finds credence on the following considerations. 24.2.1, although he informed the Commission that he can talk to the allegations of underutilization of the Hawks, when he was asked by the Commission's chairperson as to whether he has personal knowledge of the information contained in Annexure DM4, Auditor General Management Report of the Regulatory Audit and the Performance Information of the Department of Defense for the year ended 31st March 2009, 30 July 2009, he responded by stating that the reason for him to bring the information contained in Annexure DM4 to the attention of the Commission was that he intended to simply flag it with a hope to assist the Commission. Unfortunately, this is not what we received during our consultation with him. You are aware, Commissioners, that we did our best to try and bring each and every document, each and every evidence that Mr. David Maynard had. But we're taken aback when he somersaulted that he just wanted to flag, Commissioners. We spent time with him, persuading him that he should be bold to bring whatever testimony he has before the Commission. David Maynard told the Commission that Annexure DM1, in bracket, a reply by the Minister of Defense and Military Veterans to a parliamentary question number 288, capital letter E, was merely brought to the attention of the Commission to demonstrate that there are two versions before the Commission. The first version is the Minister's version, which is stated in Annexure DM1. The Minister states that the South African Air Force has 12 Gripen fighter aircrafts placed in long-term storage. The second version is that of General Bain. General Bain told the Commission that during the first quarter, he investigated the possibility, ... But General Bain simply says that they're being utilized irrespective. On page 7894 of the record, lines 5 to 9, David Maynard told the commission that the version of General Bain is different from the one of the Minister of Defense in that General Bain does not consider the aircrafts were placed in long-term storage. That's a basis upon which he talked about the two versions. David Maynard also told the commission that other than bringing the two versions to the attention of the commission, he cannot take the commission any further because he cannot adjudicate between the two versions. However, exhort the commission to make its own findings without exclusively being influenced by our reasoning in this regard. Commissioners, if there's one witness who we pushed and pushed, whose testimony we did our best by back door or front door, sideways, up, down, to put it before you, was David Maynard. The record speaks for itself. Conclusion. In the leading case of Julius versus the Bishop of Oxford, 1885, AC 214, cited with approval in many South African cases, the position is stated as thus. There may be something in the nature of the thing empowered to be done, something in the object for which it is to be done, something in the title of the person or persons for whose benefit the power is to be exercised, which may couple the power with a duty and make it the duty of the person in whom the power is reposed to exercise that power when called upon to do so. The leading case resonates the Commission's function to inquire into, to make findings, to report on, and to make recommendations. We submit that the Commission, in discharging its function, will have to interpret the word utilization sensibly. This should be done with due regard to the one hand, to the meaning of utilization by officers from the Navy and Air Force officers, and by the public, including the critics on the other hand. We submit that grammatical usage is not the only answer. Hence, we refer to the cardinal rules of interpretations that esteemed commissioners have rubbed shoulders with during their practice years to the highest court and the offices they occupied. So we need not have taken you through that. Even context in our humble submission does not provide an answer. What we simply say is, commissioners, don't look at the grammar only, because the grammar is tautological, it's tautology. Even context, do not look at it. Please look at what the critics say without discounting what the officers say. But the commission is stubborn before you. You see, I beg your pardon, the evidence is standing stubbornly before you. And most of this evidence is not with blemishes, commissioners. It is looking into your eyes. We urge the Commission to have regard to consideration of the language of the rest of all the 5 terms of reference, as set out in the government notice number 34731 of 4 November 2011. The Commission should also have regard to the matter of the terms of reference, the apparent scopes of the terms of reference, the purpose of the terms of reference, and within limits the background of the terms of reference. You will see in our closing submissions, we refer you to page 12 to 13, paragraph 8.4. Pages 12 to 13, paragraph 8.4. You could just flag it and look at that paragraph, commissioners. We refer you in that paragraph to the decision of the Natal Joint Municipal Pension Fund versus Ndumeni Municipality, 2012, volume 4, SA 493, paragraph 19, where Wallace, Judge of Appeals, mentions the following, and this is important for us to close, commissioners. The learned Judge of Appeals says, your colleague, Chairperson, in a recent judgment, Wallace J. summed up the law on statutory interpretation in a comprehensive way which renders it unnecessary to discuss other cases in any detail. He says, the present state of law can be expressed as follows. Interpretation is the process of attributing meaning to the words used in a document. That is what they give first-year students in interpretation of statutes, commissioners. Be it legislation, some other statutory instrument or contract, having regard to the context provided by reading the particular provision or provisions in the light of the document as a whole. That's where we come in, commissioners. In the light of the document as a whole and the circumstances attendant upon its coming into existence, please take all the terms of reference holistically. You'll appreciate utilization if you appreciate what underpins the reason why we purchase the equipment. Whatever the nature of the document, considerations must be given to the language used in the light of the ordinary rules of grammar and syntax, purpose of which it is directed, and the material known to those responsible for its production. We come in here. Where more than one meaning is possible, are you going to look at the meaning of the officers or the meaning of the critics, commissioners? Where more than one meaning is possible, its possibility must be weighed in the light of all these factors. The process is objective, not subjective. A sensible meaning is to be preferred to one that leads to insensible or unbusinesslike results or undermines the apparent purpose of the document. Please deal with it businesslike, commissioners. If you find that the critics' understanding of utilization is businesslike, please adopt it. If you find that the naval officers and the Air Force officers' understanding of utilization is businesslike, please adopt it and make sense out of it. Judges must be alert to and guard against the temptation to substitute what they regard as reasonable, sensible, or businesslike for the words actually used. We trust your discretion on this one. To do so in regard to a statute or statutory instrument is to cross the divide between interpretation and legislation in a contractual context. It is to make a contract for the parties other than the one they in fact made. The inevitable point of departure is the language of the provision itself, read in context and having regard to the purpose of the provision and the background to the preparation and production of the document. I've got no doubt that you have heard this opinion many times in your lifetime, justices. I beg your pardon, commissioners. I don't know why this time I'm looking at you as judges. I beg your pardon, commissioners. We've summarized why you need to consider the language of the rest of all the 5 terms of reference together. You'll appreciate utilization. In this regard, paragraph 25.6, the Commission is exhorted to consider the words of vessels. The words of vessels are echoed by what? I beg your pardon, by Judge Vessels. Vessels AJA in 1962, commissioners, have been brought to a proper complexion and context by Wallis J.A. We need not repeat that. Our concluding remarks are as follows, commissioners. I asked my colleague Ngobesa, how do we conclude? And it was very difficult, but permit us to say the following. We would walk away from this commission with our heads held high, if and only if our submissions are not decontextualized by anyone. We do not wish to live in infamy in the history of our country, commissioners. We want our submissions to remind all and sundry to remember how futures are secured when our country is strong. Of course, military strong, commissioners, as this has economic and industrial advantages. We are confident that it is not difficult to find a good story from our terms and work we put before this commission, especially in the area of utilization of the arms and equipment. In our considered view, the strategic defense procurement packages intends to define our success as a country. And they do so, Commissioners. The strategic defense procurement packages reminds our country to flex its muscles in the interest of peace within our own borders, stability in our region, SADC, harmony in our continent, Africa, and global peace. The utilization of this arms and equipment is clearly a gigantic Herculean effort, easily recognizable in South Africa's effort to project its role as a player in the global sphere. Anyone who questions that would insist that we are standing on the St. John's of the Kalahari Desert. Our country plays an important role in global peace and in global sphere. There's no doubt that the arms and equipment is used not only to benefit our military, but it defines the success of our country by the chances we give to others anywhere in the world, especially those who have dreams and determination like us. The canvas is painted with success stories as to what our military does, Commissioners. And it's through these arms and equipment that our military shines where it can. Finally, these closing submissions do not say replace the absolute values and notions of what is right and wrong found in the arms and equipment with the relativistic values of sounding intelligence and arguments, criticism, subjecting to scrutiny, questioning and questioning. Equally, do not allow the excesses of minor weaknesses and flaws of the arms and equipment to obscure the validity of their positive results and successes emanating from their utilization as set out in the Constitution Act 108 of 1996, the White Paper on Defense, and the Defense Review. Let me conclude by saying, Commissioners, many years ago in a village, there were two young men who wanted to test the wisdom of the village wise old man. And this white old man always sat on the river banks weaving. I mean, he was old, experienced, and very wise. And these two young men were growing up. Permit me to say this. I think the testosterone was kicking in. And they said to themselves, but we wonder why our parents and the village and everybody respects this wise old man. They said to themselves, let us test him. Let's see how wise he is. But they posed themselves a question, how do we do it? And one of them said, oh, okay, let's grab a locust and walk to it with it. And let's put it in our palm and test as to whether he'll find out and see whether it's a locust or not. And they did it. And they walked to this wise man who was sitting on the river bank weaving. And they go to him and say, we hear that you are the wisest man in the village, but today will prove it that you are not. And he looks at them puzzled. And he says, what's your story? They say, if you can tell us what's in our hand, then we'll say you are the wisest man. Unbeknown to them, he had already known that what they're having in their palm has to breathe at one time or the other. But he was a wise man. Now, that locust had to breathe for it to be alive. One of the boys, unfortunately, released, and by then, the village wise man had already seen by the tail that it's a locust. And he said to them, it's a locust. And they were puzzled. And then they said, okay, let's see whether he would find the answer, whether the locust is alive or not. And they asked him, is it alive or not? And he said, that one, I leave it to you. You can appreciate a piece of art from different angles, commissioners. We could be the young men, you could be the village wise men. Thank you. That's our submissions.
Thank you, Advocate Liwala. I see now it's 1:45, and I suggested that we're going to break at 1:30. Advocate Sibeko.
Chair, I would imagine that my colleague and I would need to take some time to move to where Lebala and Gobesa are. Perhaps this might be a convenient time to take the lunch adjournment break now, come back at 1:30 and kick off, because Ms. Silla will then be kicking off with the terms of reference relating to offsets, etc.
Okay, thank you. Then maybe let's come back at 1:30. And we'll continue with the topic that we are supposed to deal with until we finish. Thank you. We will now adjourn.